Yeah, I was kind of wondering to what extent are co-ops in Vermont giving preferential treatment to doing business with each other? Like, are housing co-ops particularly hiring Red House and the solar installation co-op to work on their buildings? That, you know, is there some of that kind of movement going on?
No. No, I should elaborate. The co-ops that we work with, they have a certain amount of regulatory compliance. Most of them were financed using different state and federal, public funding streams. So they're sort of part of a kind of larger machinery, I would call it, of the housing field, and I think they just tend to operate in the same way as within that culture, pretty much. They could they could choose to hire Red House, for instance. I haven't seen that level of prioritizing the co-op value over the savings among the members.
Right. And do co-op businesses often get their starting loans from credit unions, for example, or is it other kind of transaction websites?
That would probably be a no also.
Well, for worker co-ops anyway, a great source of capital is the Cooperative Fund of New England, which has made a bunch of loans to, the food co-ops and worker co-ops and co-ops across sectors. So that's been very important. I mean, we'd love, of course, to see the credit unions do more commercial. They're getting more into commercial lending, which they have, and so we'd like to see them prioritizing lending to co-ops. But, that'll happen.
Business lending is relatively new to credit unions. I mean, some have been doing it for a while, but as an industry, it's still relatively new. And we have lots of regulatory limitations also. So not just any credit union can just jump into business lending. They have to meet all kinds of certain criteria and whatnot, and then there are caps on how far they can go with business lending and whatnot. So, it's a challenge today. Most of the kind of business lending that credit unions are doing in Vermont today is to, the sole proprietor kind of situation. Somebody's buying a truck to do delivery of their wood carving, this kind of thing, those kinds of things. And, there's some exceptions, but most of it is at that kind of level.
If I could speak a little bit to that, the principle number 6, cooperation among co-ops, is something that City Market takes very seriously, and we try to do what we can. For example, if you have ever needed to use the ATM at City Market, you'll notice that it's a Vermont Federal Credit Union ATM. And we recently had a major loan with the USDA, the Department of Agriculture, and we've actually gotten to a point where we were making the decision to refinance that, and we weren't really able to talk to Vermont Federal about that. That wasn't really within their scope, but talking with the National Cooperative Bank. So City Market certainly strives to do business with other cooperatives. We also have been connected with the Cooperative Fund of New England. We've lent both money and expertise to other smaller co-ops in Vermont. A lot of the food co-ops in Vermont participate in what's called open book financing, where managers from one food co-op to another will share information with each other and talk to each other. And so, for example, right now, Granite City Grocery is a brand new startup co-op in Barrie, just trying to get off the ground, and they have been the beneficiary of an enormous amount of advice, coaching, support from City Market, from Hunger Mountain Co-op in Montpelier. So, is there more that we could be doing? Absolutely. But we do try to take that principle number 6 very seriously and do what we can.
as I said earlier, the electric co-ops tend to do a lot of work with other co-ops, but in our industry, we have formed, because it's very specialized. So our lender is a national lender that only lends to electric co-ops and provides other financial services to us. We did a number of years ago. We were looking, but in terms of like, let's say what I'll call local banking, your checking services, payroll, and all of that, we found that that the credit unions in our area, while they were starting to get into a certain amount of commercial services, really weren't set up for what we needed. Although we did look into that. A few years ago, for reasons I won't get into now, for a relatively short amount of time, we had a huge amount of surplus cash and had to develop an investment policy for where to park that, and went to several credit unions in our area and around the state to do that. But that's over with now. We do our best. We actually work a lot to promote co-ops in our area. I will give you an example. We had a relationship for a number of years with VSECU, what was the State Employees Credit Union, when they were first starting to expand their field of membership beyond employees and families of state employees and certain nonprofits. We set up a relationship where any Washington Electric Co-op member, they had to get approval for this, could be a member of VSECU. That benefit kind of disappeared when they took the next step, and anyone that lived in any of our counties and then eventually in the whole state of Vermont could be a member of that credit union. So we couldn't offer anything different than anyone else did. So we promote credit unions. Our annual meeting next month is in Barrie, and the Granite City Market is going to have a display there so that they can get new members. And when we do have our annual meeting, on the reverse, we hit up Hunger Mountain Co-op in Cabot for the door prizes for the annual meeting.
I'm reminded of two things that I wanted to say, which are relevant to this. One is that there is cooperation among worker co-ops now in our region. It's not in Vermont. It's the Valley Alliance of Worker Cooperatives is a collection of about 10 co-ops, which your urban is very involved with. Trying to get them to sort of help other co-ops develop so they can provide sort of peer guidance to developing other co-ops, which is really great. Because, of course, the big challenge for worker co-ops is that they're not in only one industry sector. They're in a bunch of sectors. So it's very hard to have a cookie-cutter approach to creating worker cooperatives. The other thing I wanted to mention, which is really, the great example in the world of what you're talking about, cooperation among cooperatives and really making the cooperative movement take off. The kind of Shangri-La of cooperatives is Mondragon. How many have heard of Mondragon? Okay, that's good. That remains the golden example. Of course, there are criticisms of their international practices, and not all their subsidiaries in foreign countries are cooperatives, and et cetera. That's all true. But they remain very true to their principles within their core co-op companies. It's really amazing. And the engine, of course, has been the bank, the Caja Laboral, which has spawned other cooperatives, not only worker co-ops, but also consumer co-ops and schools and the whole gamut of co-ops. It's really the cooperative commonwealth. It's about as close as we've gotten. There it is. So the financial engine is imperative, cooperation among cooperatives, and the whole kind of ethos of cooperation is really what's living there very strongly still.